Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Adventure Within channel. My name is Andrew Fritz. I'm a clairvoyant healer and meditation teacher. In addition to being a YouTube channel, we're also an online school of intuitive arts. We offer psychic readings, energy healing, meditation classes, and various psychic trainings. Today we have an interview with a special guest. Her name is Melanie Weller, and 30 years of working as a physical therapist and athletic trainer, combining biomechanics and neurotheology with patients that no one else could figure out, gifted Melanie Weller a reputation as a vagus nerve expert and the body whisperer. She trained with nationally and internationally renowned experts and collected certifications and credentials like fine wines. Then she had a health crisis followed by a marriage crisis and a lawsuit crisis. Her credentials did not help her make sense of the nonsense in her life. Turning to astrology, Melanie was led to an extraordinary discovery and the research to support it. Our bodies are clocks that mirror the celestial architecture of the zodiac. Our wellness depends on synchronizing our nervous systems with the cosmic dance of the solar system. One day, a patient with a long history of religious trauma walked into Melanie's office. He has his suicide plan for that night. She realized she had to bring more than her credential-based knowledge. She had to treat his consciousness itself. 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better. And Melanie walked out with her fearless presence. Since then, Melanie has been kind of leaning towards the resilience revolution, advocating, teaching, and speaking on heretical healing, a transformative approach that challenges conventional beliefs to unite ancient wisdom and modern science for spiritual resilience, the key to all forms of resilience. All right. Hi, Melanie. Welcome to the show.
Hi, Andrew. Thank you so much for having me. I'm super excited to dive into all of this today. Your topic or your podcast messaging is very, very near and dear to my heart.
Absolutely. Yeah, I'm excited too. Yeah, so one of the first questions I ask a lot of guests is how they got into spirituality, because it's always fascinating kind of what was happening before and kind of what led them into,
hmm
trusting their intuition and spirituality as a whole.
Well, in hindsight, I can say that I think it was always there
Right.
at some level. When I have been a physical therapist and in the world of and an certified athletic trainer for over 30 years, and the very early in my physical therapy career, I ended up working with complicated chronic pain patients,
Mm,
people that hadn't found success with multiple other practitioners. And in addition to my amazing clinical mentors that I had through that, the I read Anatomy of the Spirit by Caroline Myss,
mm,
and that really, she connects the seven chakras to the seven sacraments of Christianity, to the safe roads from the Kabbalah. And that was a huge aha for me in terms of like, oh, now all my chronic pain patients make sense to me.
mm,
And I would take pieces from that, like, for example, how your first chakra, she talks about, is about your relationship with your tribe.
mm,
And I would just ask my patients that had lower body issues about their relationship with community. Did they have a good supportive friend circle? Just to kind of open up that conversation
mm,
and just priming the pump, even though I wasn't doing anything spiritual per se at the time, but just bringing that into a little bit of awareness for them created huge jumps in their healing
mm,
and it appeared that it made what I did work better for them.
mm,
And then fast forward 20 years or so, and I was in my own proverbial midlife crisis in my
ah,
early 40s.
mm,
And over the years leading up to that, I had really collected credentials and certifications like some people collect fine wines. And and it was really the part that I wasn't necessarily aware of. Like I'm definitely a high achiever and I'm driven,
mm,
but it was also a way to validate myself. It was a
mm,
way to kind of overcome my own not enoughness, or to have this external authority that said how good I was,
mm,
to help me come into my own internal authority. And then I ended up in a health crisis, marriage crisis, and lawsuit crisis in very close proximity.
mm.
And none of my logic circuits were really helpful in navigating that or
Right.
figuring out why it was happening. And I did have this sense like, okay, the universe is really pushing me into a different direction. And I had always been this very highly credentialed physical therapist that, like, people, that's why people would come to me. And then they really stayed with me for my soft skills, that I had this kind of magical ability. And even when I was in traditional clinical settings, my reputation was always as the body whisperer.
Mm.
That's always what, and my husband was in the Navy and we moved a lot of places. And no matter where I lived, the people found the people that nobody else could figure out found me.
Mm.
And they all called me the body whisperer
Ah.
or sometimes the bone whisperer, depending on what was going on.
Hmm.
And the so in the throes of that whole crisis, a couple of things happened. One, I backed up just to do some reading and really figure out what was going on because I wasn't sure I was supposed to keep practicing physical therapy or I was getting shoved in this. I thought I might, in the midst of the lawsuit, I thought I might lose my license. So I was like, well, what am I going to do
Mm.
if I lose my license? And I uncovered I turned to astrology in the middle of that. And
Mm.
astrology so helped me make sense of the nonsense and also to make sense that I was so much more, that aspects of my personality that I thought were fixed, or that, there was so much more going on about myself than I even realized. It really validated a lot of things that I had felt about myself, but that the world had told me was wrong
Mm.
about myself, that I was too sensitive, or that this intuition thing couldn't possibly be true, or that, even where I like to be, or where I'm very comfortable being a little bit like, I think I find this with a lot of healthcare practitioners, they have a wiring to be a little bit aloof. And that's part of what makes you a good healthcare practitioner. Like I have a client that I always think of with this because she's a psychiatric nurse
Mm.
and like an emergency psychiatric nurse.
Okay.
And that would be, she's really good at it because she can be like, have some altitude over the situation and not get too caught up in everybody's
Hmm.
pain. It gives, like, she can do what needs to be done, and still be really good, be very good at her job. I think if you're in that kind of situation, if you're just too heart centered,
Oh,
that
it's intense.
it can really be intense for you, where you carry it home and you don't shed it very easily. And so there's value in, like, in those signatures. Like, they give us a lot of, help us, give us our skills.
Mm.
And the other thing that happened in the midst of all of that, well, what I discovered in all that, which we'll talk about in depth in a little bit, is really how our anatomy mimics the zodiac with incredible precision.
Mm.
And I ended up creating a form of energy medicine around that. And but really one of the turning points for me was having a patient walk into my office that had his suicide plan for that evening.
Oh, wow.
And he was living in a nightmare of a hallucination that he couldn't get out of. And some other practitioners had dismissed him and said, I can't help you. And we had a mutual contact that sent him my way. And I knew I had to bring more than just my clinical knowledge to the table with him
Right.
that day. And I showed up with all of my clinical knowledge. I gave him an amazing mediumship reading that even surprised me how good it was, or how precise and specific it was.
Yeah.
And 90 minutes later, he walked out 90% better.
Oh, wow.
And we, and I really walked out with my fearless presence that day. And fearless presence has been part of my brand for
Mm.
a number of years now. And since then, I've been really passionate about helping professionals bring together their expertise and their intuition. As clinicians,
Mm.
we're taught often to, just have your professional hat on and leave your personal hat at home. And I understand that advice. Like, you can't always, like, your client sessions are not about you, but at some level they are. Like, I know, I am very aware that I get a piece of healing every time I give it.
Right. Yeah.
And and that experience of transforming his suicide ideation really led me to understand what, like, how mental health shows up in the physical body
Mm.
and how our bodies are clocks. Because even if you don't believe in astrology, the zodiac is a clock.
Mhm.
And his clock that day had stopped. And based on my biomechanical assessment of him, I could really make the case that he was living in rigor mortis, like functionally, like you wouldn't
Oh,
notice it maybe so much in seeing him walk down the street, but but his he was just compensating very hard for it. When I picked apart his fine biomechanics,
mhm.
like they were maybe 10% of normal.
Wow.
And and I've seen this over and over in patients when they come to me and they have this presentation, and nobody comes to me for suicide ideation. That's not why people,
Uh,
or suicide planning. That's not why people walk in the door. They come typically because there's pain, because I'm a physical therapist, and that's, that there's some sort of physical pain going on. And I still find it amazing that our mutual contact that day thought, like, oh, he's having hallucinations, he should go see Melanie. because
yeah.
because that's not, I mean, that's not what most people would think of for physical therapy anyway.
Right. Yeah.
But I've seen this over and over, that when people have this presentation in their bodies, I ask them very specifically about their state of mind, and are they contemplating suicide? And the answer is always, it's always one of two things. It's always yes, I'm contemplating suicide, or
Mm.
no, but I feel like I'm dying on the inside.
Mm.
And so, and when people are maybe, when they're maybe not 90% limited, but maybe they're 50% limited, like they're struggling. Like they're maybe not there in terms of suicide ideation, but there's definitely a pattern there, that the more limited you are, the more your mental health, you're struggling with your mental health.
Mhm.
And it taught me about so much about how your body really informs how you think. And the science is really there on that now too, that our brains are 80% input.
Mm.
And when we're not getting good input from our body and through our senses, then we can't have good output.
Right.
And I've been looking for years for somebody to help me study this, because I can put numbers, to me, for all of the soft skills that I have, this is something I can put some hard numbers to.
Yeah.
And I haven't found the right person yet. It might be something that I just have to create the study and do it myself. But I really, and in my own journey, like I struggled for many years with suicide ideation and didn't ask for help, because I don't even know that I knew it was, like, getting help for that was even a thing.
Mm.
But I know we have so much more awareness now than we did through the 80s and 90s
Right.
with it. And but I'm really passionate about getting this out there, because it's so, to see people's mindsets, or to see the way they're thinking about themselves be able to shift so dramatically with really what's, I think, is a pretty easy intervention.
Mhm.
And I think is a huge gap in in the care around it. And there's amazing care, obviously, for that kind of thing. But yeah, even anxiety has a specific presentation. People with bipolar have a very specific presentation to me. And all of the
Mm.
there's all these very specific biomechanics that go with these diagnoses. And I think it's really worthy to study this more.
Mhm.
And because I can measure all of these things, when I discovered how precisely we're made in the image of the zodiac, like, for
Mm.
example, the way that our ram's horns that represent Aries
Mhm.
are the that our ventricles of the brain are the same shape as the ram's horns that represent Aries, and our
Oh.
throat anatomy is the same shape as a Taurus bull, and our heart anatomy is, our aortic arches are the same shape as a symbol for Leo, and it works this way in the order of the zodiac, head to toe through the body. And so we have this, what I call a zodiacal skeleton.
Mm.
And if your zodiacal skeleton isn't right, it can be really hard to move through the world. And when you fix it, you get the same improvements in range of motion and strength and mood and well-being that I get with all of my evidence-based osteopathic skills, but I would get them even faster.
Mm.
And so that's what I really loved about it, because the game that I always have played with myself is what one, two, or three things can I do for my patients that make them make 10, 20, or 30 things better for them.
Hmm.
Because I don't see people that are very often that are having simple situations. They're having very
Right.
complex situations. And, and I very lovingly, say that they're often like, they're just head to toe train wrecks.
Mm.
You can find something going on abnormally at almost every joint in their body in the way that they're moving. And so being able to have a couple of techniques that really undo masses of dysfunction is really life altering for them. And it's endlessly delightful to be able to create miracles for people every day and to help them see the miracle that they really are. Because and that's part of what seeing anatomy seeing how, when I deal with a lot of people with religious trauma. And when I
Mm.
think about being made in the image of God, in the way spiritual texts talk about that, like we are literally made in the image of the zodiac. And I think that that's
Mm.
what I see a lot of our spiritual texts really as scientific texts that told the stories of our anatomy and physiology through the mythology and the stories. And because we know that science, they told, like, for example, the ancient myth of Isis and Osiris is a story of the Earth's precessional cycle. It was how they wrote their science.
Mm.
They just did it differently back then.
Right.
And when you can really connect people to these, like to the fractal of the bigger picture that they
Mhm.
are, it really can open the doors for some incredible magic. And and that has certainly been my drug of choice for a long time.
I love that. Yeah. I want to back it up just a little bit.
Hmm.
You working with that particular patient, that experience where you said you kind
Hmm.
of found or discovered your fearless presence. Um, you mentioned a mediumship or kind of tapping into your intuition.
Yeah,
Can you go more into that?
sure.
Did you know what was happening in the moment, or was it kind of like, later
I,
down the
I
road, you're like, oh, that's what was happening? Like,
I did know what was happening because because leading up to that, I had really connected with my intuition in some new ways, and I had made the commitment to be more honest about my intuition with my clients
hmm,
as well in there. And when I did that, the first person that I saw, I told her that I said, I know this is going to sound really crazy. Like, and these are all people I knew I was very safe with
ah,
saying, some of these things to start with. But I think you have a ghost in your neck.
hmm,
And she said, I know exactly what you're talking about, and had a whole story to go with that. And she was so relieved that I validated that felt experience
hmm.
for her. And so we were able to really then transform her neck pain. And the next person that came in, I said, there's a book that you need to get rid of. And she knew exactly what book I was talking about and had a whole story
Oh,
to
wow.
go around that. And so I had taken these baby steps, and I had studied, taken some mediumship classes, and, kind of dipped my toe in it.
Hmm.
The challenge for me with those is that because I do mediumship in this very intimate experience, one on one,
Hmm.
with somebody. And when you go take a class, they all do platform mediumship. You stand on stage and read people.
Oh, yeah.
And that was terrifying to me
Hmm.
to do it that way. But I've learned that I can do it. And I know now that the same, I'll say, quote unquote, muscle that I use to see the zodiac in the body
Hmm.
is my mediumship muscle, because I've been able to drop in on my mediumship groups now and then, and I can still do that, do a platform reading, even though I'm not practicing that on
Hmm.
a regular basis. I think for myself, it is that same muscle. It comes from the same brain wiring that makes
Mm-hmm.
me go like, oh, your Aries ram's horns are wonky, or that your Taurus bull is facing the wrong direction, or your
Mm-hmm.
the Sagittarius bow and arrow in your hips isn't right.
Mm-hmm.
That's the same mediumship muscle, and it's really and when I do this for groups, part of where I think it's just so incredibly special and powerful is our ability to imagine something else for someone else, to
Mm.
imagine that someone else is different. And it's really fun to take this kind of archetypal, or, I often categorize it as like a Jungian physical therapy approach, where to look at your anatomy through archetype.
Mm.
And for example, your sphenoid bone that sits behind your eyes
Mm.
looks very much like an owl or a bat. It looks like
Mm.
it's got wings. The wings come up into your temples. And I love in front of a group to take somebody who's has legitimate restrictions in their neck and show everybody where those restrictions are and how they can't move their neck very well.
Mm-hmm.
And then I'll have the group imagine for them that they've got this big, beautiful owl flying behind their eyes
Ah.
and guide them through that. And I'm not touching the person or doing any energy. Like, I intentionally keep myself still, but I did have a little process where I guide everybody through imagining that for the person.
Mm-hmm.
And then I will retest their range of motion, and they'll move again. And it's normal. Like, their range of motion is massively shifted from having the group imagine something different for them. And conversely, taking somebody and treating that for them and having the group test their own range of motion before and after, that they get shifted from witnessing
Ah.
that they will experience more range of motion improvements and less pain. And so it really shows how beautifully connected we all are.
Mm.
And I think speaks very much to this, to the reciprocity that, like, when you give those things, that you also receive.
Right. Do you, I kind of got two questions with that. The first one is just when you mentioned the owl, like imagine
Hmm.
like the wings expanding, or do you think that's kind of like the power of like a positive mental image picture, like the being
Oh,
able to just see
absolutely.
that, and that how that kind of transforms whatever their maybe lower energy they're stuck in that kind of part of their body or part of their life?
Absolutely. And if I'm just going to talk about it like in some hardcore geometry and physics and whatnot, like most of our I'm not going to get the statistic exactly right, but say like 90% of everything that's out there is made of some combination of carbon, oxygen,
Mm.
hydrogen, nitrogen. Like, there's like a core group of molecules that make up most of everything. And so we're going to see repeating patterns
Right.
in things, that they're just assembled in different ways, but we're going to see certain patterns repeat,
Hmm.
and that makes sense scientifically in that way too. And so we're tapping into, I mean, yes, it's energy and thing, but you're tapping into like, your sphenoid bone has a fractal relationship with owls. Like, it's the same,
Mm.
it's like it's the same geometric language basically, or the same, I think, in terms of the physics. And so that you really then can start to shift things. And the neuroscience says that we're all hallucinating. Reality is just the hallucination we agree upon.
Yeah. Yep.
And so to be able to create a different reality for someone else is, I think, way easier, and for ourselves too, is way easier than we might think. Or, this is
Mm.
like, I love the things that get people better faster, because my people, by the time somebody comes to me, and even decades ago, like, if they'd seen six other physical therapists, I didn't need to do the same exercises and
Mm.
everything that they had been through already. Like, that was not going to be helpful to them.
Right.
Like, they were looking for something different. They wanted a different answer. And so to have different ways in our, imagination is really the superhighway neurologically for
Mm,
us. It's so much faster than our logic circuits.
mhm,
Like our verbal circuits operate at something like 40 bits per second,
mm,
and our intuition and imagination and things like that work at like 11 million bits per second.
mm.
So
Yeah, a
you're
lot.
really getting on this neurological superhighway to transformation. And it can be, my profession is incredibly guilty of teaching people lots of boring exercises.
Got it.
And to give people something that's fun that they can engage in, that is a little more like play, because we learn, like now we know that we learn massively faster through play than we do through other ways, through like just rote practice or something that's maybe a little more technical.
Right.
And so I think that, and I think it does work on a quantum level. I think there's, definitely energy at play, but I think we can even back up and just be really kind of hardcore physics geometry
Hmm.
about it.
Yeah. Um, and then kind of going back again with the mediumship, you mentioned kind of whether it was one-on-ones or kind of these group kind of formats.
Hmm.
Um, I know kind of the aim is the kind of the maybe validation or healing for the people you're working with, but
Hmm.
in that process, do you notice for yourself, doing the mediumship or the healing work or the guiding, do you notice any transformations with yourself as other people are receiving healing? Like you're
Oh, yeah. I'm a hot mess if I don't treat enough patients in a month. Like that energy's got to go somewhere.
right.
And if it has nowhere to go, then like I become very disorganized.
Got it. Yeah, yeah. I can really
It's incredibly regulating to my nervous system to treat other patients, treat
got it.
other
Yeah,
people.
yeah. I can
But but I do think that there's yeah, like, well, because you're always, everybody's a mirror. And I think
right.
when you treat other people, and sometimes things come out of my mouth and I'm like, oh, that message was really for me too.
Mm, yeah.
That there's in it's really helped me have a lot of compassion for people in different situations, and even even in my own difficult relationships in
Mm,
my life, to see where to go, like, oh well, maybe like my mother and I have had a very hard, complex relationship, and to go like, oh well, like she's expressing, like she's doing, we're all doing the best that we can with the
yeah.
situation that we have. And it's really, between our astrology charts, like we're doing our jobs. Like it's very easy to make the case that it's her job to disrupt what I love and value, to kind of pull the rug out from underneath me.
Mm,
And it's my job to want freedom from all of that.
yeah. Right.
And that's just like, we made, and it's exquisitely obvious to me that we chose each other.
Mm,
But, when I look at our astrology charts, when I put them together, but we just didn't choose something that was really easy,
right.
and I do think that there's a higher octave of this that was possible, but I also know that contrast is the language of the nervous system.
Mm,
Neurons fire, they don't. There's no in between. And contrast is also the language of storytelling. You would not go to a movie or read a book or watch a TV show and rave about it to your friends if it did not have enough contrast in it, because it would be boring.
right.
And your nervous system will not let you live a dull story.
Mm,
And I think that's the end of it right there. That's the ultimate. Like, we are here, we are all living some kind of best-selling novel, whether we know how to write it in that format or not.
yeah. I agree with that. Yeah. Um, before we move in that direction, I want to kind of take it back. With researching you, I noticed that time seemed to be very relevant or important in what you do. I just want to first start off with What do you sense that most people, like the average person on the planet, what is their relationship to time generally? And maybe like how does that impact or how would that manifest kind of in
Hmm.
their day-to-day with that average relationship to time?
Well, I think it can obviously show up a lot of different ways, but if like uh, if you're thinking about the zodiac as a clock
Hmm.
and that your body is a clock,
Right.
like it's like a little clock and you're moving through the great clock and we're all these little timepieces moving to kind of swimming in time. And I know there's a lot of thought about how time is a construct and
Mhm.
whatnot, but I also think there's an aspect of it where we're like fish that don't know the water exists
Ah.
because we're just swimming in it.
Hmm.
And when time gets, and I think your vagus nerve, which has really been my clinical specialty for many years, treating it as a pinched nerve in the body, is like the pendulum of your clock. And it swings you between your sympathetic and parasympathetic systems, or, between pleasure and rest and digest and freeze,
Mm.
and so your vagus nerve function really kind of is part of what determines how, I think just really how the pendulum of your life is swinging, how smoothly or not
Mm. Hmm.
that's going. And if we, I am a big advocate for what I'm calling time informed care over trauma informed care. And I don't want to minimize how important trauma informed care is because it's really important for people.
Hmm.
But we'll never sell it to the whole world because not everybody wants to deal with their trauma. And I think there's a lot of drawbacks to walking through the world like everything is a trauma response.
Mm.
And it's a very Western perspective to say that your brain is all about survival and protection. In a more Eastern perspective, they would say that we are pleasure seeking. And they
Mm.
can be two sides of the same coin. Like staying safe and seeking pleasure can look the same
Hmm.
way because safety is certainly pleasurable.
Sure.
But somebody who walks through the world hypervigilant about safety and avoiding trauma walks through the world very differently than somebody who's walking through the world seeking pleasure.
Mm. Yeah,
And
that's
it's a very different mindset. And if we want more based on the zodiac, depending on the kind of time that we want, like if we want more playtime, for example, we would, the constellation Leo is associated with play
mm.
and it's associated with the heart. And so if you want more playtime, doing more heart kind of
Mm.
exercises is going to help you get that. If you want more spiritual time,
Mm.
for example, or rest time, even, Pisces
Mm.
rules the feet, and you might do more foot
Mm.
centered exercises. Or if you want more leadership, like more initiation, more, kind of activate your inner warrior kind of
Mm.
thing, then you might need more head type exercises because Aries rules the head.
Mm.
And so, depending on the kind of time that you're really looking for, you can very prescriptively assign aspects of your anatomy to that.
Mm.
And even your physiology, like like going with the Aries, the stars in the Aries constellation are the same shape as a molecule of ATP, which is the energy source for all cellular function, including muscle contraction.
Mm.
And it's really the same archetypal function. In the Vedas, after I had really just kind of uncovered the way our macro anatomy mimics the zodiac, I stumbled upon some resources through about how the Vedas describe our anatomy. And like the Hindu deity Ganesh is our brainstem and cerebellum, where the brainstem is the trunk of Ganesh is an elephant,
Mm.
and the brainstem is the trunk, and your cerebellum is the ears, and your pons is the face, and the roots of your trigeminal nerve are the eyes of Ganesh, and Ganesh is a blessing giver, remover of obstacles. And that's really what your brainstem and cerebellum do for you from a motor control point. Like they help you navigate, avoid obstacles so that you don't trip.
Right.
But sometimes like if you want fewer obstacles in your life, in a Vedic system, you might do a mantra,
Mm,
Ganesha mantra, but sometimes Ganesh is like not sitting in your brainstem and cerebellum. Like it gets distorted relative to that. And so being able to bring that energy back in a centered way allows for whatever nervous system exercises and rituals that you're going to do for regulation to work better and work faster. And you're just not fighting yourself so
right.
hard.
It just some of what you're talking. It sounds almost a little like and correct me if I'm wrong if I'm interpreting it wrong, but like a body spirit kind of like harmony or kind of alignment as opposed to kind of being like slightly off kilter. Is that kind of
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think what I'm really doing is treating consciousness,
got it?
period. And I can talk, I mean, I could totally, I mean, I can go down there's some amazing models in the research about how like for example, sticking with the cerebellum,
Hmm.
that our cerebellum has the same math basically as the cosmic web,
Mm,
like the spectral density and, like, but it functions, it's a smaller scale, but it's the same ratios and everything as the cosmic web. And the cells that scientists associate with consciousness are called pyramidal cells because they're pyramid shaped. And how many cultures all over the world built pyramids? Like
yeah,
all
yeah.
of them
Yep.
for consciousness. And your cerebellum does not have pyramidal cells in it.
Hmm.
And so, it's identified as part of your subconscious. So that makes sense. But if there is going to be a mechanism through which the stars, the positions of the planets really influenced our behavior, I would say that it's through the cerebellum.
Mm,
And there's amazing research about how when solar and space weather disrupts the electromagnetic field of the Earth, that it's measurable in our vagus nerves. And the extent to which it's disruptive depends on the strength of our interpersonal connections. So basically, the lonelier we are, the more we get blown about by those things.
mm.
And we know clinically that we're in a world with a loneliness epidemic, like maybe even a
Yeah.
loneliness pandemic with the way that it's a big, big problem. And
Hmm.
it's the equivalent on your health of smoking 15 cigarettes a day
Mm,
to be lonely. And, I take that, when I think about the loneliness epidemic, I think about how in Chinese medicine our lungs hold grief,
mm,
and in astrology, Gemini rules the lungs. And the story of the Gemini twins is one of grief. One is mortal and one is immortal. And when the
mm,
mortal one dies, the immortal one asks Zeus to put them together in the sky, or in some versions, to give his brother half of his immortality so that they can be together. And I think our deepest grief is for our mortal relationship with our immortal self.
ah,
And that's really, I think, why spirituality in the research is so incredibly potent as both in protective terms and in remedy terms for, especially for mental health, and that it's a huge part of physical health, but it's really connecting, whether we know it consciously or not, but it's getting, helps to get us in touch with our souls,
mhm.
or that, but I think that grief for where we originally came from drives a lot of our illness
Yeah. Yeah.
and behaviors, and certainly spirituality. When we talk about time, religion, or like your spiritual beliefs, I'll say, even, and you can talk about it through the context of religion or not, but whether you
Mhm,
believe that we live eternally or that it all ends when we die,
mhm.
that, like, that's all about time. you know,
Hmm.
and that relationship with time drives your behavior here. Like I have several friends whose parents don't are not involved in their lives, you know, even as like we're all in our 50s, you know, that because they believe like my friends that are my age, like they left the church, you know, they're not towing the party
Hmm.
line, and their parents believe that if to keep their children in their lives is going to have eternal damnation consequences
Yeah.
for them. And so like they're making that choice to not communicate with their children, you know, that's because of the eternal that their eternal sense of time.
Hmm.
And so, you know, whereas you know, some people that just, you know, believe that like life is short and we got to make the most of it here, like might make a different choice in that.
Hmm.
You know, or if you believe that, you know, if you believe that there isn't hell, for example, you know, that there is no such thing as being, you know, eternal damnation, that then you might make it, their parents might have made a different choice in terms of keeping them in their lives. So those
Right.
belief systems drive how we spend our time here.
Yeah, it's and I can relate with what you're saying because I've seen that. And yeah, so it sounds like someone hanging on to a set of beliefs and how that can influence their actions in their life and their relationships, and sometimes it can manifest in kind of a negative way, not being able to have a relationship with someone you know love or
Absolutely, absolutely. But that drives like our sense of time of our, you know, what, and I don't know that there's a right or wrong way to do it because I will say, like my atheist friends, their spiritual practice is music for the most
mm,
part. You know, like it just shows up differently in their lives,
mm,
and but it drives, but yeah, that sense of your eternal or not eternal or somewhere in between kind of nature, whether you realize it or not, it drives a lot of people's choices.
hmm. Is that what you would call like your fearless presence? Is that what you that really
Well,
um
I think that yes, that if you well to me for I have defined fearless presence usually as bringing together your expertise and intuition, or bringing together your body and your soul, that you get to, you know, live fearlessly right now. That the you know, and to really understand that the and to come in relationship into relationship with your inner authority, because when you're afraid of spending eternity in hell, that's really giving everything over to external authority,
hmm.
you know, versus really tapping into your internal knowing. And, you know, we're in an era right now. You know, I deal with a lot of people with religious trauma, with authoritarian trauma, and there's a lot of overlap neurologically between religious, authoritarian, and institutional trauma with people that's different than ordinary or like more typical trauma. It's more similar to complex trauma, but it's got its own, those things have their own unique neural
Mm,
signatures. And we're in this era where we're seeing a lot of authoritarianism bubble up around the world.
hmm.
And we are also like the planets are in similar places to where there are planets in similar and directly opposite or say I'll slow down for a second. Some planets are in similar places that they were leading up to the Civil War, U.S. Civil War.
Mm-hmm.
So we're seeing that kind of domestic unrest and us versus them within the U.S.
Right.
right now. And we're also seeing some planets are opposite where they were at the beginning of World War II. And so I call that the fascist mirror.
Mm,
But we're seeing, you know, but we're seeing the fascism and you know, like the authoritarianism really bubble up as well. And I think we're really in this spiritual revolution period. And that's what Neptune and Pisces would indicate. But the shadow of that expression of that is addiction to dogma.
mm,
And so that's the range, you know, the contrast, the range of what we're getting
mhm,
with all of that. And and just being able to have the altitude to see what's happening,
mm.
for me, and for, and when I educate people around this, when I like it creates a lot of peace that like, oh, it's not like we're just in this cycle of time where people's cerebellums are getting activated by
Yeah.
the positions of the planets, and they are fish that don't know that the water exists, and that it's, they're reacting to the energies at play. And I think these kind of how the planets influence our collective consciousness is, I think, one of the most potent cases for why we need astrology in the first place.
Mhm.
And and why we need healthy vagus nerves, why we need our pendulums to be able to move freely through our bodies, to be able to have good input to our
Mhm.
brains. And also why we need, I think it can offer some clues as to like I'm really interested in how we scale nervous system health. Like how do I, and that's what I like doing with the groups is like, treating one person and getting the whole room to shift.
Ah, right.
But how would I do that for like I used to work in the lowest performing school system in New Orleans, and nationally we have Louisiana has some of the lowest performing schools nationally, so our low performing schools are
Oh, okay.
really low.
Got it.
And and those kids have had a lot of trauma.
Mm.
They've witnessed murders. There's lots of deep trauma in some of those school systems. But I think about, well, how would you decorate a classroom, for example, to help them organize their eye movements
Mm.
so that their trauma doesn't follow them as heavily into adulthood as it would otherwise?
Mm.
Or how would I train the teachers to structure a lesson to include some somatics,
Mm.
or uh, some nervous system exercises? Because the same exercises you would use to rehabilitate time in the brain, to improve. So like your cerebellum does sub 1 second units a time. And if you're not organized in your sub 1 second units a time, it's very difficult to be organized in seconds and minutes.
Mm. Mhm.
And so what kind of little exercise could they do to get the class on the same page that would, maybe carry into adulthood to have some really, help them realize like, oh, look, I have a body. My body can feel better
Right.
when I do this thing. And this helps me think. This helps me feel happy.
Mhm.
And I think especially if we can get it in with the children, bake it into to our schools, I think that that's really the key to some bigger transformations, to trying to get those like society level transformations. But also like how would I
Yeah.
bake it into a hospital or into a physician's visit with a patient? Or
Yeah.
because I think like I think feng shui is a nervous system regulation
Mm.
system and can absolutely be used that way. Good design, well organized space. We know that it feels good to walk into a clean, well organized space
Right. Yeah,
versus a
that
chaotic, cluttered one.
yeah. That would be, yeah, I think our, yeah, healthcare and especially the education needs to be transformed in a way that's brought more into present time. That's um yeah, it would be nice to see more awareness to this stuff,
Oh yeah,
in
yeah.
healthcare. So it's not like an either or game, but it's hey, here's the physical and medicine and science, but then here's spiritual and mysticism, and blending this together that works for
Oh, for
everybody.
all of it. Well, and spirituality
Yeah.
is really just, I mean, to me, like it's just like knowing your body, like knowing your own inner authority. And that's really how they define it in the research too. Like it's your inner spirituality is inner authority, religion is outer authority.
Mm-hmm.
And the and we're always trying to do the same thing. Like as church attendance has plummeted over the last 10 or 15 years,
Right.
nervous system regulation as an industry has come up. And we used to get lots of nervous system regulation in church. It's singing,
Mm.
prayer, like when you're singing like in the hymnal and you're looking at the words and looking up at the altar and looking back and forth, that near far exercise is a great nervous
Uh,
system regulation exercise. Even following the priest maybe as he's making the sign of the cross,
mm,
like like gazing up and down and side to side is really good for your nervous system. And even in the Sufi tradition where they spin
mm,
for some things, like they're doing vestibular work. And now we have basically despiritualized a lot of that,
yeah.
which I don't think is necessarily bad, but I also think that it's important. Like, we're always trying to regulate our nervous systems and always trying to do this. And I think that I've tried to make it really accessible on my Substack, and I'm ramping back up my YouTube channel and
Hmm.
podcast to really be able to give a lot of this away so
Hmm.
that people don't have to pay thousands and thousands of dollars to a professional, because you have a body, you get to know how to use it.
Right. And kind of going on that one example, say one person has religious trauma, it negatively affects maybe their relationship to a loved one, and it kind
Hmm.
of there's a disconnect there in the communication or connection with those people. I guess it's not something a lot of people talk about because it's not the fun part, but the going from, okay, I have these beliefs or I have this condition maybe or something I'm handling that's negatively impacting me, but they want to go through and make the change. So the in-between process of, hey, I'm handling this but I want to be over here, and that kind of the in-between part. What do you notice that the transformation? Sometimes it's not always, it can be messy sometimes.
Oh, it's messy. It's so messy.
Yeah.
Yeah. And well, I think that it part of it is definitely creating some safety in your own nervous system, that like in like organizing your eye movements and getting sound
Mm,
to be safe and movement to be safe and smell, or like helping to map your body a little more clearly in your brain.
mm,
And that can be because any part of your body that isn't clearly mapped in your brain is going to perceive a threat there. And so you might get pain, or you might have like a big emotion or
mm.
something like that. But a lot of it, what I find really helpful and I'll like to layer in with all of that is who is living rent free in your nervous system.
Mm.
And it can be really subtle, because even if you're like you feel like you're in an okay space with it. And I'll use a personal example.
Sure.
When I did this for myself, and I one day I was like, oh, I wonder how my mom is breathing in my body. And like,
Mm.
if I tested my own breath, I would get like, I was breathing great. My breathing mechanics are fantastic. But when I tested how my mom was breathing in my body, I got this wildly different response
Uh,
that I would associate with a lot of anxiety.
mm,
And so, and we know scientifically that we inherit the traumas and the fears of our ancestors. So
mhm.
the things that you're afraid of are, you're like, a lot of your behaviors are not even really your own. You're just acting, like your DNA has literally been tagged with this.
Yeah.
And so so layering in some intention that, that I was doing my breathing exercises and doing my eye exercises and doing my imagination exercises for how my mother's anatomy was expressing in my body.
Yeah.
And that was incredibly powerful at kind of decoupling or like making her a lot less irritating to me when things went wrong. I'll say like, but it
Yeah.
like takes the emotional charge
Yeah.
out of things, that you can like let the other person do their thing and you do your thing, and it doesn't have to be this incredibly frustrating
Mm.
thing that takes over your body and makes you feel like you have no control.
Do you feel like the awareness and the differentiation of like, oh, this is me and my body and breathing versus, oh, this is her and that's
Absolutely.
yeah,
Exactly. The
yeah,
differentiation, and, and that's part of that differentiation part is something that happens in your parietal lobes in your brain,
mm,
and that's where we do duration estimation with time. And so there's a lot of like you know, your brain, everything in your brain is highly connected. Like
mm,
things don't happen in isolation, but it's very easy for our brains to confuse pain and pleasure,
mm,
love and hate,
mm.
those kind of
Dichotomies almost.
opposite those dichotomies. Yeah, because they are overlapping circuits. And so I think, when I look at somebody maybe behaving in kind of an unloving way, like I think like their nervous system, they're probably getting some pleasure out of that,
Mm, interesting.
without really realizing it, or those circuits are just a little bit miscommunicating, or, like the information is maybe a little fuzzy as it's going through. Like the timing, like one of the interesting things with I think is like when we have expectations,
Hmm.
when we set expectations, it influences not what parts of the brain get active when something happens, but it influences the timing of the signals
Ah,
through the brain. So if you and I have different expectations about something, like we are going to have wildly different, the signals are going to move through our brain in different times and kind of create a different reality for
right.
us. Whereas if we had, set, like a lot of clinicians will set expectations
Mm,
with their patients ahead of time. That helps to, everybody's on the same page, and it literally helps the signals to move through in similar timing
I see. I see.
with people. And so, and like when we fall, or we're, if you've ever had a car accident or something like that, and you feel like time, like suddenly everything's in slow motion as it's happening, that's your amygdala slow down time perception.
Mm,
And your right amygdala especially is associated with fear. And your amygdala respond really nicely to visual input. This is why, like in therapy, EMDR is really great
mm,
for helping people with trauma, because it's an eye movement therapy. And so it helps you organize your eye movements. Your amygdala don't tell you that the world is so threatening
right.
around you. You know,
Right.
they dial down. And so, like even very conventional things that wouldn't necessarily be associated with rehabilitating time in the body are doing that.
Mm, hmm. Um, I feel like we could go on and on
I know I could talk to
about.
you all day, Andrew. I hope we've had like I know that we've covered a lot of territory
No, this is
here.
great. Yeah, maybe we could do this again, but I do want to make sure that if people are, they're interested in what they're listening to and they want to work with you or learn more about you. I know you said your podcast and YouTube, but I know you do have some upcoming retreats, and I think you do like a reoccurring
I do,
monthly activity. Do
yeah.
you want to talk about some of those?
Sure. The first Sunday of every month,
Hmm.
I co-host with Stephanie Drury a rewiring religion event where we
Nice,
teach people how to rewire their religious trauma.
nice.
And if you go to my website, melanieweller.com, all of this is there. I write on Substack, and my paid Substack subscribers get to come to a heretical healing event that's offered twice monthly.
Awesome.
All the articles are free, so if you don't want to pay, that's cool too. But you get my gift is my time,
Nice.
and where I do those kind of group healing demonstrations.
Ah,
And I've got lots going on. I'm getting ready to launch a heretical healing program to teach everybody how to do this themselves,
very cool.
and especially to, and to have a higher level of it really for teaching clinicians how to resolve religious, authoritarian, and institutional trauma
Got it.
with their bodies. So I have lots of free resources, and and then I've got this program going too. I have a retreat in Nashville in July and a retreat to France.
Yeah, so the Inner Flame retreat, is that the one in
Yes,
Nashville?
the 10 year inner flame is in Nashville, and those are centered around Mary Magdalene in the body. And there's the way that the way that we crucify ourselves in our brains, like
Mm,
that crucifixion cross shows up quite literally when we have lots of brain chatter, and when
mm,
we help to clear that brain chatter, then we literally get to be resurrected.
mm,
And but yes, we I love teaching. I call it the neuroscience of miracles,
mm,
and being able to really understand how art and architecture and spirituality affect your own body, so that you can develop that relationship with Mary Magdalene, or with the spiritual practice that suits you best. You know, I did not grow
mm.
up Catholic. I grew up Lutheran. So Mary Magdalene was like one line of at Easter in
Uh,
my upbringing. But I will tell you, Mary Magdalene has chased me down in my adult life, and the like in some in incredible ways. And so yeah, and just really like how these stories live in our body
mm,
is pretty incredible, and how the collective consciousness influences us.
mhm.
So helping people kind of deconstruct that and optimize it, so that you can, like for your own intuition, that if you want to have these meaningful conversations with Mary Magdalene, or, these deeper, I'll say like mediumship type
Mhm,
experiences, whether it's just for yourself or with others, I think we all have the capacity to train our brains to
mhm,
do this. And the difference between like a spiritual experience in the brain, or a mediumship kind of reading, and anxiety and things that are and dissociation especially,
mm,
is your ability to come back with information.
mm.
When you can like leave your body and retrieve the information and come back, like that's, that I think then it's okay to leave your body. you know
Right.
but people don't, but when you don't know how to leave and come back very well, then you end up with a diagnosis like dissociative identity, or those dissociation patterns. But when you can really
Yeah.
leverage it into a reconnaissance mission, it can be really magical.
Yeah. Yeah, I look forward to a time where we can look at these abilities as like our natural superpowers and bring the awareness of, hey, these are what they are and they're natural and here's how you work with them. And it can actually really assist you in
Oh,
having,
absolutely. Yeah.
yeah.
Well, and people that are told that they're too sensitive or too much, or,
Mhm.
that whatever's wrong with you,
Right.
are more often than not, I like, because I see lots of these people, and this has been part of my story too. Like, you are a finely tuned instrument,
Hmm.
and nobody's taught you how to
Right.
play it well.
Hmm.
And
I agree
so
with
when you
that.
learn how to play your finely tuned instrument, then you can really use your skills in amazing ways. And a lot of times we have these skills that I see a lot of people that have some pretty amazing intuitive skills that they don't talk about with everybody.
Hmm.
And they don't have anywhere to direct them for healing purposes, or for sharing. And and kind of like me, when I don't treat patients, like it ends up being pretty messy. Like you
Right.
have to,
Yeah.
like, that energy
Somewhere.
has to
Yeah.
go somewhere. And so when you can share your gifts, however that is, then we're all healed.
Right. I agree with that. I like that. I know you mentioned, I think, your website before, melanieweller.com, correct?
Yes, yes.
Awesome. Okay. And then I'm sure they can discover more there and get to your podcast and YouTube from there.
All of it's
Perfect.
all of it's there. So, and
Awesome.
yeah, the rewiring of religion. And so I've got lots and lots of free stuff. I do see some people one on one. If you're interested in that, reach out to me.
Excellent. Perfect. I just want to say thank you, Melody, for coming on and sharing your experiences and stories and wisdom with us and the audience. So thank you for your time and thank you for being yourself here.
Oh, well, thank you, Andrew. My karmic backstory is, and my childhood trauma is all about lost voice. And so it heals me to be able
Oh,
to, that you sharing your platform for me to use my voice is incredibly healing. So thank you.
awesome. You're welcome. Yeah. All right, everyone. Thank you for watching another episode. We'll see you next time. Take care.